Okay, hello everyone. Sitting at my balcony, I can see what I think is almost a full moon. I was thinking about, giving an episode before I sleep, sharing an episode. And I stumbled upon this series of quotes online, which I'm a bit tired right now, but there's some feeling in me that is telling me go forth and share this episode. So the title came, and I will use a notepad for this episode, and these recent episodes that have the notepad, keep in mind that it's another way of saying that there's going to be silent moments of writing and hopefully, loud moments of speech. Okay, so before I get into the poetic significance, I have a sort of personal, inner realm, tactical approach towards solving things. I have this view that everybody, their DNA renders them a sort of never before seen unique problem solver. We human beings give the same set of problems to a group of human beings, and based on their performance measure their IQ. But in reality, if a human being has enough effort, let's say you were a being, let's say an immortal being, or you had an immortal being's effort, you had endless effort, over a long enough time span, I don't know how to say it, it's like when you keep trying, the reality is set in a way where it's as if you haven't accepted defeat, you haven't accepted the end. I guess I'll start here by saying that what is philosophy? I've divided the title into 3 portions, and the subtitle where I've written understanding equates as secular divinity. I'll get to explaining that. Something very important to quote to start off this episode. There's a man, important scientist, I believe. Excuse me, not a scientist, a Dutch philosopher by the name of Baruch Spinoza. And Baruch Spinoza, he was around from, in the 1600s. He passed away 1677. And so he has this quote which is the essence of the subtitle, where he says the highest activity a human being can attain is learning for understanding, because to understand is to be free. That means on some level, 8 billion temporary creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, they're looking at the emptiness, they're freaking out over all the unknown that's surrounding them, and in some sense their freedom is to understand their world. You know, if you see, the species is in a sort of dilemma right now, I would say, where we want freedom and understanding at the same time. Or people emotionally are inclined towards freedom without a sort of consideration. For understanding being the greatest freedom, really. Freedom of the body is movement, that's the greatest freedom. The freedom of the mind is to understand, and understanding means your memories and the present are to some degree synchronized, they're in alignment. So, back to the episode, to the main title, Philosophers Sharpen Their Minds. Or sharpen, let me see how I wrote it. Yep, philosophers sharpen their minds with the sky's edge. So, philosophy, people should know this. Anybody interested in philosophy should know this. Philosophy, the word, has its source in Latin from ancient Greece. And so the word philos plus Sophia it equals philosophy. The word philos, it means pretty much loving or to love. And the word Sophia means wisdom. And so philosophy is the love of wisdom in another sense. And wisdom, you can say, is true understanding. You know, let's say somebody hasn't been to skydiving, and somebody has been to skydiving, right? And it's as if we wonder who has more wisdom when it comes to skydiving. It's as if the person who's actually gone to skydiving, they have wisdom. They have the actual experience where you can say the knowledge extends from, you know. Our species is so conditioned and is raised through its ethnocentrism in such a way that it doesn't realize true meaning for the human experience has to be an experience. Technically, language is an experience. Let's say somebody's listening to somebody else talking about skydiving rather than going to skydiving. Still, the words will animate, but the wisdom comes when the person has journeyed through the direct experience. That's when true wisdom is there, you know. I even look at myself right now, wondering, okay, what do I know? right? I'm some guy starting a podcast. What do I know? And it all comes down to the conclusion of how I have experienced this life so far and what is looking through my eyes. That is the advantage, I would say, I find myself having when it comes to sharing these talks, really. Now, philosophy, I'm going to read for you how the dictionary defines it. The dictionary says philosophy is the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence, especially when considered as an academic discipline. Another way the word philosophy has a meaning is that it's a particular system of philosophical thought. For example, Schopenhauer's philosophy. Now, Schopenhauer's philosophy, just so people know, it's pretty much, he had a religious, it's like his philosophy is extended from his perspective of a religious universe. But there's so much more, Yeah. So another definition of philosophy is the study of the theoretical basis of a particular branch of knowledge or experience. For example, we say the philosophy of science, the philosophy of the mind, the philosophy of the soul, all of this. The philosophy of, other dimensions, which becomes metaphysics to some degree. Philosophy, the best interpretation a person can have, is that philosophy is a conscious attempt towards totality, right? I don't know how many people have maybe, not everybody's born, I mean, me personally, of course, when I was younger, I wanted to be a soccer player. Like, I didn't think I'd be talking about philosophy, actually. But something very fascinating happened. I realized that when it comes to who is looking through my eyes, I don't know it, right? I don't know what is looking through my eyes. And when I realized the unknown variables in reality are more than the known variables of our memory, so it's as if like a creature that has seen a couple of things. It's as if every memory you have so far is a sort of alphabet which the mind is trying to use the geometry significance of every memory to figure out how the future is going to happen. It's as if the brain is in a sort of technically a hallucinatory, subjective romance with its own outcome. But anyways, I'm just trying to say that when we think about philosophy, we're trying to understand. We're not fearing questions that start with why, right? If you ask an analytical philosopher would say the questions should just be how, they shouldn't be why. I believe it was Friedrich Nietzsche. He has this epic quote. I think it goes like this. Let me look it up, actually. Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche says, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow." Friedrich Nietzsche says this. And it's another way of saying, when we wonder about philosophy, is like a fearless attitude towards wondering what is the purpose of life? And now, if life doesn't have a purpose, that becomes the starting point, right? That means to me, I see that human beings on this planet, their psychologies are pretty much divided into two classes, okay? There's the immaterialist class of human beings, and there are the materialist class of human beings. And to me, the immaterialists, they are under the impression of an unknown causal mind being in some sense the source. It's pretty much everything's okay. Every human being is experiencing cause and effect. The materialist is considering the cause to in some sense be physical. Do you know? The immaterialist is considering the cause to be non-physical, right? So pretty much human beings are like, okay, there was a non-physical cause, non-physical origin to reality. There was a physical origin. Now, anything that goes beyond the domain of physics, or even the word metaphysics, which the word meta means after. So metaphysics means after physics, all those people who are, let's say, they're shunned for talking about spirituality. Do you know, if they realize what the word metaphysics means, they can just, the same things that a spiritual person can say can be seen as a sort of metaphysical classification of reality, as if what is the greater narrative, what is the greater narrative beyond how the senses display reality. This is really the true essence of mysticism. Mysticism is an ancient art, but it archaically revives anytime the human being just reaches one of the colossal questions of the world, which is to discover its source. Right? It's as if like even though we're 8 billion human beings and we're like, yeah, we got biology textbooks, we know some shit, like the species knows, but in reality, what we know is a tiny percentage of what is happening, right? And based on that tiny percentage, pretty much it's like, a small creature in a world so big has a reaction to how unknown the world is, and in some sense has no choice other than to position meaning, right? When I wonder about the evolution of intelligence, I'm like, okay, first there was a world, then the world became a self, creaturehood happened, then the creature became a world to itself, a self to itself. It's as if the unconscious self became a conscious self. Then the conscious self is left realizing it has to become a conscious world. And it's another way of saying, upon the recognition of one's individualism, a collective purpose arises. That means if let's say there's a state of mind or a way a human being can live on this planet where you're just an individual from the beginning to the end, but if you somehow I shouldn't say master, but somehow you have wielded, I'm trying to say, at the edge of knowledge you come to the unknown. The unknown means there's something more than how memory is giving meaning to what is, right? You see, the issue is that the human being has been thinking it's perfect from its beginning initial analysis, but that is not the case. Very beautiful and profound arguments can be made on how human beings will never be able to understand anything. It's as if certainty is a myth in a changing world. But anyways, the focus, I'm still at the beginning of this talk. I'll say this: philosophy is pretty much wondering about the intent behind manifestation, or the intent behind an event. Okay? A philosopher is not afraid to look at the moment from a bunch of angles. But if you look at, for example, a religious person, they've locked their perception and meaning into a specific angle. You look at, for example, the scientists, and scientists have done something interesting. Rather than locking their perception in a story, they have locked it into a method, right? You know, it's as if science is something where it's not like, unlike religion, it's a method. Religion is a story. Like, do you know, they're completely two different techniques to interaction with the world, you know? So a philosopher has a freedom that neither the atheist or the theist has. The atheist, believe it or not, the atheist and theist have something in common. Each of them is choosing to entertain a singular narrative to truth. It's as if the atheist is saying, no, buddy, it's just the matter, it's all the stuff we can see, it's just this world we're all in, and that's it. It's the body, that's it, right? It's as if it's the dimension of physics has become the absolute. Now, when you look at religion, it's actually, this narrative tells you that it's an inconceivable, the absolute is an inconceivable position. It's like, you could say, if a mathematician looked at a formula and there was an unknown x variable, and then they started worshiping that unknown x variable, it would be equivalent to religion. Do you know? This is why there's the concept of submission in Abrahamic traditions and monotheistic traditions. Why? Because you have to release that which cannot access, you know, that which cannot access the superior, right? It's like, I'll give you an example. It's like a person wants to go into a nightclub, and then imagine the bouncer is having a bad day and says, it's like, no, buddy, you can't wear a hat in this club. Right, you got to take off your hat before entering the club, you know. And let's say it's, I don't know, it's something, it's a cap, or I don't know how to say it, but it's like, I'm just giving an example, like, you have to get rid of something to have permission to access a sort of state of mind. In the religious perception, what you are really getting rid of is your ego, and what the ego is one's desires. Technically, without a concept of a future, an ego cannot exist. You know? Anyways, that wasn't the best example, but I think it works. I'm just trying to say that religious mentality, get rid of your individualism, realize the whole thing's being functioning under, you know, a collective unconscious of intelligence, and you can pretty much say, like, those people who worship God are actually worshiping an inconceivable state of mind which they can never conceive, and because you can't conceive it, you have to put aside the conceivable machine, you have to put aside the intellect, and in some sense this is where faith comes in. You know, there's so many different kinds of beings on this planet, and each of them is implementing their strategy towards life subconsciously. You know, people are incredibly smarter than they will ever appear in the outer ones, you know. There's deeper dimensions to everybody. So anyways, philosophy eventually comes to this thing like, why is this? Why is anything happening at all? Okay. And so it's trying to just see as much as you can while you can, or if you can. Then the second part, when I say philosophers sharpen their minds with, they sharpen their minds with the imagery that came to me for this episode was in some sense a sword. I don't know, guys, like sometimes I've thought about myself if I had lived back in the day, let's say in medieval, whether in medieval times or in ancient, you know, cultures where they would go to battle with swords, shields, and spears, and like bows and arrows. You know, I have thought what kind of weapon I would use if I was like in some sort of Lord of the Rings scenario. You know, I don't know if people, their minds are playful like this, but for me, I fathom myself in different times, eras in history, and wonder what choices I would have made if I was there. You know. So I don't know why, but initially I felt that if I was a warrior back in the day, I would probably, use a spear to fight, because the spear has a range that other things don't have. Probably a spear and like a, short sword. But at the same time, I would also think that I could, probably be an archer, But anyways, the idea is back in the day they sharpened their weapons. And so there's even this quote where it says, like, if you want to cut, if somebody, I don't remember the exact quote, but I remember the idea behind the exact quote. The idea, there's this quote that says if somebody wants to cut, like if a wise man wants to cut a tree or something, right, he spends 4 hours sharpening the axe, and then 1 hour, let's say, cutting the tree. Similarly, I find that when we look at philosophers, philosopher is another way of saying an inquisitive animal, a creature that has questions about what it is, so it inevitably is destined for advancement. That's the nature of the mind. It is not content with the memories it has, and due to it being in the presence of a changing world. It's as if when a philosopher sharpens their mind, they are clarifying their own experience of existence, right? Being a philosopher, guys, is another way of saying being somebody who can see a lot, okay, in the inner realms, or in the outer realms. Now, sight, if we have this notion that the brain is wielding sight, so imagine the attention of the human being is like a sword. So imagine the philosopher doesn't have a sword in his hand, but he has a mind that can be pointed at different corners of the universe, or different levels of manifestation or animation of reality, and to fathom meaning. Excuse me. What I'm going to say is a bit off topic, but I think it was like, I was for a second thinking about Buddha, and I'm like, his disciples asking him what truth is. Buddha's like, my God, people are trying to be perfect in an imperfect world. People are trying to be photographs when life is a movie. And all that Buddha could say is just be quiet and watch how the moment is happening until you have become it. The philosopher, is using memory. Okay? Let's say a warrior has a sword and shield. Let's go with that typical mentality. Okay? And, if you're fighting one-on-one, maybe you don't need a shield, but if you're in a battle, you probably need some sort of shield and a sort of wall behind you. Now, to sharpen their minds with, this is, again, I'll just get to this. The imagery would be sword being sharpened by an ancient warrior, and I would say the philosopher is the inner warrior. The philosopher is the modern warrior. It's the closest thing we have to a mind being, not fearless in a sort of battlefield of circumstance, right? You know how when kingdoms would get sieged, they would be like, save the children, save the women and children, right? Back in the day in medieval times, like when, let's say, the kingdoms, like an army's invaded a kingdom, they would save the women and children. To me, the women and children are science and philosophy, science and religion. And philosophy is pretty much those who have gone in the front lines of wondering about how does the experience of life, how is the experience of life held as a concept. It's all starting from here, guys. You know, when you pull the strings of your own perception, or let me share a quote that's incredible. Actually, let me find it. By the way, this episode, guys, I'm going to be reading a lot of quotes, because that was the point of it. I wanted to document these quotes that I found. There's a quote by Soren Kierkegaard, and Soren Kierkegaard, this quote is like high level, guys, because really, like, if scientists are discovering facts and we clap for them, they're discovering answers. Philosophers that discover questions or find answers which pretty much connect the meaning of the mind to the whole cosmic activity. Philosophy is bridging the relationships of an individual object with a collective subject, actually. So Soren Kierkegaard, one of the great quotes, his great quotes that has endured till 2022. He says life must be understood backward, but it must be lived forward. That means the mind requires to reverse engineer to its origin, and the body requires to just go forth. That's something really beautiful about the archetype of the warrior in the outer realms. The warrior understood it has no choice. You see, it's hilarious. We're given free will and people want freedom, but there's so many things in this life you don't have a choice when it comes to. It's just circumstance. It's just how the moment is being ushered forth as an intelligent activity. We all have our flaws, life is filled again with perfections and imperfections. But something I learned from a great, the father of surrealism, surrealist art, Salvador Dali, says, do not fear perfection, you will never reach it. It's another way of saying we have nothing to lose if we choose to advance. My personal approach, which I learned, this wasn't something, I would say the disposition I had when I was young. I felt exiled from my outer realms. I had a very unique everybody has a unique psychology. But when I look at myself, it's as if I had some force had closed me off to the outer realms, And at the time, because I was young, I couldn't become responsible for that inner condition, right? It's as if you could have, a child succeeding in the outer realms, being perfect, at school and everything, but in the inner realms, there's like problems that have gone unsolved, unacknowledged. Our experiences become memory, and information becomes, in some sense, the sword and shield of the mind. Now, I would even say it in a better way, actually. So, before I, go into the metaphor of sharpening, the philosopher's kind of sharpening its mind with the sky's edge. The sky's edge is actually a very romantic idea. It is how infinity is waiting for mankind, or for mankind's mind sphere. So I would say questions are like, I'll say it this way, it's as if the human ability to express and receive is like the sword and shield. Expression can be said to be a sword. Reception can be said to be a shield. I mean, think about it. When somebody holds a shield, you're actually, blocking attacks. And when you use a sword, you're actually releasing an attack in one position. It's as if you need to, like, honestly, war could be a reason why, anyways, whatever. I won't get into how war has shaped human consciousness, but I'll say this, that there's abilities here. Okay, there's fundamentally, due to the dualistic nature of reality, two major ways a person is able. Okay, you're able as awareness, which is space, and you're aware as what is moving in the space, which we consider to be the body. Right now, as I'm speaking to you, even though my body is in the conscious waking state, I'm a physical organism, biological organism, a human being, part of the human species, giving this talk, but at the same time, my mind has no linguistic owner. What I mean by this is that, I have a name, but it's like very early on I realized I am not my name. I am not how anyone else can see me, and I am not even how I have seen myself. As if the mystery of the inconceivable surpasses memory. It's beyond memory, guys. Something is happening where I mentioned this in a previous talk, literally the talk before this, where I was saying Carl Jung had this thing. He was saying that Carl Jung was saying we're pretty much dreaming all the time, and when we wake up in the day, that consciousness distracts us from how the brain is simulating itself all the time. It's actually living. Like, the dream state is like 24/7, the conscious waking state. We think we wake up we think we go to sleep and we have dreams, but it's what the mind is doing is the other way around. And you know what the biggest proof of this is? That our brains are dreaming in the middle of the day, because when a student is in a classroom and the teacher is monotone and boring, like the teacher doesn't talk about the unknown, like the child eventually is like, what am I listening to? And the child goes into their inner realms and they daydream. Do you understand? It's as if people in modern culture, they think boredom is something bad. They dislike boredom. They think boredom is like a stepping stone to, let's say, becoming lesser, or like depression and whatnot. A sort of self-accepted reductionism, which is unnecessary, really. Because we don't know who we are, we cannot judge who we're being right now, really, to some degree. Who we will be is beyond who we are. I can make any mistake in this talk, and then who I will be tomorrow can replace that, when I speak, guys, I'm trying to paint a picture. You know, this is why topic-wise I jump to many topics. Okay, I'll say this. We have the sword, we have the shield. The shield would be reception, you know. The sword is expression, as I mentioned earlier. The sword could be another way of saying, like, it's like speech. Speech is the sword, and listening is our shield. That means that's the shield of the mind, is like its ears. Its ears, how can I tell you? If the mind is functioning through language, if the underlying code to the personality, you know, that means imagine, like, just like Neo went into the Matrix, when a person thinks that they're a sense of self or an ego, they have gone inside a linguistic, into a language oriented inside a character in a story matrix. Okay, now the code on the matrix screen of the computer would be in some sense equivalent to the design of the ideology accepted. Right? It's as if people think, here, I'll read this quote from Oscar Wilde. Hopefully I can find. Okay, guys, check out this next level quote from Oscar Wilde. He says, most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's opinions. Their lives a mimicry. Their passions a quotation. You know. And he's right. You know why? Because the past is more comfortable than the future. Because the future we cannot be certain of. But because the past has happened, we can be certain of it. Like, the mind is so capable, guys, that anything that it has held important, it can instantly choose to make it unimportant. And vice versa. You can turn, you know, a meaningless universe into meaning with just one view. It's like we have the word meaningful. Imagine it was spelled F-U-L-L. Right? That means it's like the word meaningful with two L's would be as if you're full of meaning. And then we have, in some sense, the meaningless, or the meaning, it's like meaningfulness and meaning emptiness. You know, it's just bizarre how light is entering the eyes of a creature, and based on that, everything, it's like that's the first domino. The sensory perception is kind of like the first domino. Then the inner realms and the nature of the mind is like all the other dominoes, and then it eventually comes back to the outer realm. If somebody said, what is the purpose of the mind? I would say it's to move the body on some level. And somebody says, what's the purpose of the body? To, in some sense, be moved by the mind. Or if you're a materialist, the body's moving the mind. There's a quote from Voltaire, guys, this French philosopher. This is honestly one of my favorite quotes ever. He says, "Every man is a creature of the age in which he lives, and few are able to raise themselves above the ideas of their time, of the time." It's as if we are born in an illusion, and very few wonder about if it's even an illusion. Plato's allegory of the cave is such a fractal, it has such a fractal implication. The cave could be anything. The cave could be our mind, the cave could be the galaxy, And there's a force that wants to step out of the cave, that is tired of identifying with shadows. So, the sky's edge. The sky's edge, actually, there are two edges to the sky. This is something of my own development, so I'll proudly present it. But pretty much I noticed that one edge of the sky is the edge of the cosmos we can't see. So it's another way of saying is the edge of an unknown world. That's one of the edge, edge of the cosmos here. I think that's better right there. Okay, there we go. Edge of the cosmos. That's one edge. Edge of the outer sky. The other edge, I would say, is our eyes. That means, who knew? Our eyes are an edge of the sky. They're one corner of it. So I would say consciousness of sight or I'll say here, I can also say access of sight through biological eyes. Equals edge of sky. So the sky's edge is technically, you can use the unknown infinitude of the outer realms, or you can in some sense use the unknown eternal presence of the inner realms. Right? Because the philosopher, I mean, seriously, guys, like, what can the philosopher do? The philosopher's okay, we named it, we named non-existence into existence. And in some sense, it's like we come to the unknown, and the unknown is present in anything. This is the beauty of the unknown, guys. You can have the edge of the sky be unknown. You can have the edge of the human mind be unknown. You can have the edge of, the center of the earth be unknown. The unknown is like the finale of, the evolution of conscious reality. It's pretty much the edge, okay? The edge of knowledge is the unknown. The edge of thought is a non-thought, Or imagine there was like this concept of antimatter, like Paul Dirac wrote equations about antimatter. So we can say, for example, like there's anti-thought, Like emotions are anti-thoughts, just like, antimatter. Or maybe properties of space connect to antimatter, or lead to its definition. It's so brilliant, life, because it is happening in so many mysterious ways that everything is a surprise, right? It's as if, imagine the human being was like, God, why were we in a changing world? Why did you put us on the treadmill of time? And God in some sense, imagine, responds, the voice of the archetype of God, and he says, because I wanted to give you endless gifts. That's the blessing of being an entity in a changing world. And rather than realizing the multidimensional capability of the human organism, we are identifying with the past and what the past wanted, right? Because you see, the Buddha spoke about desires, but he didn't acknowledge it in the inner realm on the level. Maybe he did, I don't know. But like, it's like when it comes to the inner realm, it's as if who I was yesterday, that had a certain desire for the world, and who I am today has a certain desire. Who I was 10 years ago had a certain desire. It's as if what's happening to all these desires? Is there an evolution of desire through understanding and the expansion of awareness? So for the sake of simplification, guys, I'm gonna erase what I wrote here for the sky's edge part. There's pretty much the inner sky. Excuse me. And we have edge of the outer sky. So pretty much the philosopher can use the mysteries behind its eyes, or the mysteries in front of its eyes, to sharpen its perception, in some sense, in the quest to wonder about the origin of space and time. So, I guess I'll finish with the title here, and I'll say, what philosophers sharpen their minds with the sky's edge. It's another way of saying when a fascinated human being wonders about the edge of a system. they have to recalibrate the position they are in. And I would say what the philosophers are capable of, that let's say the theists and atheists aren't capable of, is that they can actually experience to some internal level, to some degree internally, the shift of various contexts to the world. Religious people are locked into, the context of revelation, and in some sense, science is, in some sense, locked into the context of a technique. It's only the philosophers, guys. The philosophers are philosophers are those who realized the matrix was the matrix, but perhaps hadn't gotten out of the matrix yet. Sometimes I wonder if all these talks are ways where, I am trying to, as if as a being, I am trying to sharpen my attention out of manifestation. It's like you realize your whole life you have been living as an individual being, but you realize the implication of the meaning of the moment could have been collective from the beginning. The moment the person realizes there's collectivity when it comes to the human experience, the access point to true collectivism is to discover the presence of the collective within the individual. In yoga, we have 4 systems. We have these 4 ways towards enlightenment. There is the Bhakti Yogi. The Bhakti Yogi is using love and emotions to get enlightened. Do you know? You can say the Raja Yogi is using knowledge to get enlightened. The Karma Yogi is using the outer realms to get enlightened. Do you know? Or is using cause and effect to get enlightened. Pretty much karma means work. So in some sense, it's a sort of, those beings, it's like you can get enlightened, you can discover the true nature of something, even if you are blindly working in a system. If you honestly work, you can discover the true nature. Then there is the Jnani Yogi. And the Jnani Yogi is a bit unique. Pretty much it's like how you can use meditation techniques to get enlightened. Just like scientists are saying, like, you can use certain methods to comprehend, the cosmos, the outside world, the outer space, right? It's as if mystics were saying there's certain meditative techniques where you can contemplate your inner space. You can explore your inner space. This statement actually is to some degree universal, guys. That's the title of this episode. Why? Because every philosopher has been a human being looking at the world and being like, what's going on here? That's the rawest form of philosophy, a fascination of why anything at all. So, whoever you are, honor philosophy as just the trunk of the tree of knowledge. Historically, it is the case. You know, I'll read for you something here. It says, philosophy is a combination of two Greek words, philion, philosophia, meaning lover of wisdom. In ancient times, a lover of wisdom could be related to any area where intelligence was expressed. This could be in business, politics, human relations, or carpentry and other skills. That means it's like Marcus Aurelius to all the other philosophers. They probably saw him as a philosopher. Because it is the search for intelligence. That's what all really all we desire, right? Let's say you're a person who you got physiologically, in the physical, and let's say in the outer realms, all your wishes came true. Or let's say you reached a certain point where you had no longer, it's as if you had found the cheat codes to the system. Then you will be left to playing the inner game. It's as if once our bodies have lived and once our minds have lived, then the authorization to pilot beyond this plane of existence comes, right? They say when the student is ready, the master appears, and to me, that's what I think death is. Death is like, the final teaching of manifestation, at least for these us. Our minds hold voices. Our hearts hold universes. They hold the world. It's not just the brain that's projecting the world and holding it, it's the whole body involved. There's a brilliance to nature that because it happens by itself, it needs no other justification. It is pure. It's as if, I don't know if there's any, greater, I shouldn't say greater, but greater, I don't believe there's a greater concept in the inner realms other than wondering about one's true nature or one's pure nature, right? Because truth, if it's limited to subjectivity, it's just a kind of cat and mouse game. Who knew that in the modern era, people are playing like Tom and Jerry games with belief systems, Sorry guys, I'm a bit nasally. My attention's to multiple things right now. Let me go to a new page and honor the spirit of the talk and continue. And so understanding equates as secular divinity. Imagine you're a human being, and for some strange reason, as if you were born with it before you were born, imagine you have a love for your species, for your collective. That means it doesn't matter if it's whatever sort of unit of kind of categorization it is. It's as if there's a feeling that the human experience is participating in a universal event. And it is individually participating, and it is collectively participating. Right now, the point of history we're in is one where I would say we are behind our eyes participating in the world more than in front of it. And of course, this is not the same for everybody, but I'm just saying that what it appears to me is that we have more motivations to go towards the fictional behind our eyes than to truly try to advance the non-fictional in front of our eyes. It's as if the species is slowly being pushed to a scenario where its comfort suffocates it. I should use better terminology. I wanted to say comfort. Its comfort suffocates its future. But it's as if, like, the more emotional we are, the more, uncalculated decisions are being made. It's as if, somebody was like, yo, children are like forgetting basic arithmetic in the world, mathematicians seem to be failing. To me it seems that it's like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. It's kind of like the world's heading there. I don't know who's controlling the world, but whoever it is, or whoever, of course it's all of our influence, but I'll say it's as if there's better books than the Brave New World, A Brave New World. There's a utopia. Anything that doesn't advance leads to suffering. Suffering is the inability to change. Guys, I'm realizing I could be a bit, maybe too tired for this episode to fully unravel it and open it up, but from the unknown came the known. From the known came the unknown. From the unknown came the known. From the known came the unknown. We have been in, you can say the human being may, in modern times we're not a multidimensional being, we're just what we see in the mirror in a single dimension, but I'll be honest, it has been a multidimensional place. That means even if we choose not to believe that we are multidimensional beings, the world is behaving like one. The world is happening. It's as, what it is, it feels to me that even though in the Abrahamic tradition, let's go to a theological point here, Adam and Eve ate from the fruit of knowledge, and so they were banished. But when you look at nature and you look at bees, ants, you look at animals and ecosystems, it's as if nature If you were a religious person looking at, the miracle of nature and like how ecosystems function, it's as if look at God creating such an incredible world where even the insects have organization structures. It's as if nature, you know what it is? It's like karma is behaving like a seed, like a sprouting seed. It's as if what is going to happen, it's as if the seed already knows the shape of the tree, it just has to become it. It's as if there is a destiny to the human life, and a part of us knows it, and all that is left is for us to become it. I would say from the secular standpoint, eventually, metaphysics needs to be considered. When a multidimensional position is being accepted, the next question is, okay, what do we do after we've perceived ourselves as multidimensional beings? Pretty much, there comes the freedom of adding any dimension to the moment. So if the viewers look at the screen, I think I'm gonna maybe write out a bit of this episode. Okay, here I'll explain it. Divinity means ethos for the modern man. Divinity is a word that we think it comes from religion, but it's prior to religion. That means before man could read a holy book, it's as if divinity was happening in the room. So in some sense, divinity is kind of like the intelligence of a universal mind. How a universal mind happens. Now, for the secular society, it's as if some human beings on the planet, they just want to be in the material sphere of perception. Right? They just want to identify as just an object in an objective realm, and they don't even see anything more than that. Right? So the question comes in some sense that at least the secular person considers time. And because the secular person considers time, they have to consider the future. Because they consider the future, they have to imagine. Because they imagine, that means reality needs to use an abstract process to know its realness again. So in some sense, when it comes to the notion of time, what an ethos is, the word ethos is like the spirit that moves, like a phase in history, or I would say it's the narrative. Like what right now, Civilization 1.0, I realize it doesn't have a narrative. I would say Mr. Within realized it doesn't have a narrative. So what can we do? We need to implement and bring forth a greater narrative. Now, because we didn't have a greater narrative, people are going towards fiction, right? Or I shouldn't say fiction, they're going towards abstraction. It's rather than using abstraction to discover truth, it's like we're believing in the abstraction, right? So the language level of relationship with reality. But I'm saying it's like the inspiration of the species. For me, it was like, guys, I'll tell you, one of the happiest moments of my life, is when I realized the implication of the idea of the advanced civilization. If somebody says, Mr. Within, do you have a gift to give, the world? I'll be like, the advanced civilization is a gift on its own. It's the activation of the most capable and the best future selves that will walk in this realm. So anyways, divinity means ethos. Ethos means what moves, or spirit of face. When we come to secular, the concept of secular, I would say, an initial, I would say this is pretty much materialism prioritized. For example, religion, it makes a materialist perspective. It prioritizes. So secular society doesn't want to think too deeply about nature, because on some level you don't need to, but it's as if, because the future will invite so many new technologies, it's as if the secular society that denied imagination is going to realize the future of cyberspace is going to be the manifestation of our imagination on Earth. People don't realize how incredibly strange, how strangely incredible the future can be. Do you know? Like when the era of collective minds come, like right now we have one biological body, right? And let's say we have one natural body and one natural mind, right? And we're using computers and technology. It's as if we're like preparing, but in the future they're going to have a cyber life, and in their cyber life their psychology is going to feel an equivalent freedom as they feel in their outer life. I'm trying to say is that just like the universe, let's say, cooled down and planets manifested, I don't know how to say it. Maybe I can go to the point of the inner sky and the outer sky. If attention chooses, let's say free will is a selection of where attention ends up going, and attention is in a dualistic reality, The moment it believes it is manifestation, you enter samsara. But if a person wonders about what is knowing that existence is existing, I'm saying that regardless of the materialistic outlook we have on reality, the mind is not an object. That means it's as if like the human beings like, I don't believe in imagination. Imagination isn't real, but then we ask who is saying that? And the answer is actually from imagination. It's hilarious. It's either imagination doesn't exist, you know, or how should I say it? It's as if like either reality is being imagined or imagination is real. It's as if it's a subject, right now, who I am speaking to you, like the physicality, like right now, if somebody, let's say if it was a video and somebody was seeing me, my body is like, my physical existence is being conducted by my inner existence. And my inner existence, at least how far I got, you know, in reverse engineering to the earliest moments of my attention, I came into this realization that I was never a human being. Do you know? That the world was never this. Right? It's like the nostalgia of a universe from another dimension, imagine. What can be said? Understanding equates secular divinity. Secular society is materialistic oriented because it doesn't want to experience, it doesn't want to wonder about the mystery of what is moving matter rather than what matter is. You know, there could always be unknown dimensions we're not aware of. It's like the moment scientists declare there's an unobservable universe, it's as if like whatever truth we find from the observable universe, it's like the tip of the iceberg of the inconceivable dimensions we don't have access to. It's like, you know, an ant can't listen to a human podcast, and perhaps a human being cannot fathom an extraterrestrial being, you know, or fathom a higher dimensional entity. And an entity is pretty much, you know, the boundary of reality attention is entitled to. On some level we are creatures of matter, and on another level we're creatures of attention, creatures of consciousness. You know, the person's like, why am I conscious that I have consciousness right now? You know, and imagine an enlightened guru was like, silence. Do you know? As if silence. The poet Rumi has a quote about silence. Let me find it. Rumi says, when the lips are silent, the heart has 100 tongues. Rumi says, listen, calm up your mouth and be silent like an oyster shell. For that tongue of yours is the enemy of the soul, my friend. Through silence. Oh, that's it. Through the thing is something else. The poet Rumi says, to see the moon that cannot be seen, turn your eyes inward and look at yourself in silence. Rumi says, let silence be the art you practice. Rumi says, my soul sits in silence and then asks again, where are you in all of this? The poet Rumi says, embrace the power of silence. Rumi says, keep silent, because the world of silence is a vast fullness. Rumi says, listen to silence, it has much to say. Rumi says, silence is the language of God, all else is poor translation. You know what he means? He means that faith is the recognition of a field of intelligence, that it's being a field of intelligence. We are being moved as much as we are moving. You know, the mind has its unique ratios. So secular society has to find a new ethos that in some sense inspires the whole species to want to understand life. The blessing of the idea of the advanced civilization was like honestly, it was equivalent to like you know, a celestial gemstone. Finding a celestial gemstone. Imagine you're a miner. You know, you know, you're tunneling through karma, or you're tunneling through samsara. The advanced civilization is the argument of arguments. Every outer purpose will lead to it. It's like honestly an omnipresent, omniscient idea of advanced civilization. Any civilizations rise and fall, and they can, in some sense, what do you call it? Eventually, every conscious force on a planet wonders about the beyond. The world is designed to remind us that it comes and goes, you know. Aldous Huxley says there are things known and things unknown. There are things unknown and things known, and in between are the doors of perception. And Mr.Within would say, it's a revolving door, guys. The mind is spiraling, right? We tell stories of selfhood as if they're a linear line, but really how the mind is working is that, you know, sometimes I have this strange feeling that ideas are orbiting around me. Like there's a geometry involved. As if, imagine, instead of seeing an aura, like a spiritual person seeing an aura to a person, imagine you saw, just like you saw a sort of orbital system to the sun of the solar system. The consciousness, the attention of the human being is a sun, and all its belief and visions and memory and imagination is like what's orbiting around it. it's hilarious. It's like behind our eyes, God is watching. In front of our eyes, man is watching God. Man is trying to find God. Right? But what I'm meaning by God is watching is another way of saying it's an inconceivable, unknown element to how consciousness is being. So, I guess understanding equates secular divinity. In order to build an advanced civilization, we need to expand the scope of collective understanding. You know, it would be as if teachers deciding to, in some sense, unleash their ultimate performances, and it's, you know what it is, it's like everybody's passing the Olympic torch, but they want to run as far as they can and then pass the Olympic torch. That's how an advanced civilization is built. The honor of continuity is the infinitude of the future. So now, guys, that explains the subtitle. Talks pretty much, we got the talk out of the way, and now I'm gonna talk about, just read a bunch of quotes like next level quotes. I don't know, somebody has managed to compile these on the internet. So I've read a bunch of them already. Seneca, or here, Christopher Marcus. Hardship often prepares an ordinary person for an extraordinary destiny. Seneca, there is no easy way from the earth to the stars. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, well, I must endure the presence of a few caterpillars if I wish to become acquainted with the butterflies. Voltaire, I read this, but I'll read it again because it's so epic. Voltaire says every man is a creature of the age in which he lives, and few are able to raise themselves above the ideas of the time. Marcus Aurelius says you have power over your mind. Not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Guys, that's an emperor giving advice. It's worthy of listening. Viktor Frankl. Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. And guys, Viktor Frankl is Viktor E. Frankl is like an incredible. It's like a human being that. Guys, you know what's crazy? There's a giant moth flying right beside me. I'm on the balcony and I'm just... Okay. I'll continue, guys. Viktor Frankl is a Holocaust survivor, guys. His philosophy seems very pure. Anyways, I'll keep reading from the list. Baruch Spinoza. The highest activity a human being can attain is learning for understanding, because to understand is to be free. I've said that. Bruce Lee, be like water making its way through cracks. Do not be assertive, but adjust to the object, and you shall find a way around or through it. If nothing within you stays rigid, outward things will disclose themselves. Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless like water. If you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, and it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. It's as if Bruce Lee is saying, have a view on who you are that is actually shapeless, but it can take the shape of any moment. He's pretty much saying, let your mind be be slower than that. Not slower, but it's as if your inner realms are on cool down, and so you're just looking at the outer realms, so you're being purely every moment rather than thoughts overlaying the implication of the moments. Ayn Rand, I started my life with a single absolute, that the world was mine to shape in the image of my highest values, and never to be given up to a lesser standard, no matter how long or hard you struggle. Albert Einstein says the most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion that stands at the cradle of true art and true science. Guys, I'm going to copy paste this in the chat section. I don't know how many people are listening, but honestly, I appreciate anybody who's actually listening. That's like, to me, that's kind of like, you know, the logo's doing its part. To continue. Soren Kierkegaard, life must be understood backward, but it must be lived forward. Fyodor Dostoevsky, man is a mystery. It needs to be unraveled, and if you spend your whole life unraveling it, don't say that you've wasted time. I am studying that mystery because I want to be a human being. He's saying the pursuit of truth, regardless of how, like what kind of journey it is pretty much like our ability to, it's as if it's like a purpose to get to know what we are, and then, you know, so many different purposes can arise. It's like we're a species that doesn't know what it truly is. Like there's something so bizarre and fascinating about that view. Lao Tzu says the flame that burns twice as bright burns half as long. Marcus Aurelius, dwell on the beauty of life, watch the stars and see yourself running with them. Aristotle says those who educate children well are more to be honored than they who produce them, for these only gave them life, those the art of living well. You know, it's just honor everything that gets you to your next moment. Everything ever. You know, what else can a human being do? It's like the species, because it wants to advance in the most efficient and most advanced way from the beginning, it doesn't have time for, like, you know, violence and suffering. Like, you know, we should be post that. We should be at a point where we have solved so many of, like, you know, the challenges to physical, you know, it's like biology needs to, if biology could evolve, like, I don't know how to say it. It's just, We need honesty to have a strong foundation of advancing civilization. And when I say honesty, that means the whole species has to, in some sense, choose to become a human, decent human being again, to then give it another try to see how far it can go. You know? Plato says the price good men pay for indifference to public affairs is to be ruled by evil men. Ralph Waldo Emerson says it is easy in the world to live after the world's opinion. It is easy in solitude to live after our own, but the great man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude. He who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude. Exactly, that's, I think, guys, I found, like, you know, something I need to train it. Because to me it's like true solitude is chaos and order being a sort of inseparable. It's as if when you see both those dimensions at the same time, you're not those two dimensions. Imagine we have the concept of inner and outer. Imagine in the English language we bring the concept of beyonder. B-E-Y-O-N-D-E-R, you know. John Locke says it is one thing to show a man that he is in error, and another to put him in possession of truth. Socrates says the only thing I know is that I know nothing. Isaac Asimov, never let your sense of morals prevent you from doing what is right. Marcus Aurelius, and when he says what is right, that means our humanism should transcend our culturalism. That's when we start caring for, you know, the nature of the human being. You know, it's as if a person could be looking at truth, never wondering if the one who's looking at it is it, you know. Marcus Aurelius says the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. This is huge, guys, because if you live in a world where you want to build an advanced civilization, the quality of your thoughts are, you know, becoming inseparable from the concept of the ultimate or the greatness or advancement. These are pretty much three names for the same force. Epictetus says freedom is secured not by the fulfilling of one's desires, but by the removal of desire. Marcus Aurelius says everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. Marcus Aurelius says, everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. Oh, okay, I read that actually. Maybe I need to look into this more. So, from the conqueror's eyes, from an emperor's eyes, everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. Yet, yes, but the one who's seeing cannot be judged in the same way as what it's seeing. That means it's like the superior enlightenment for Marcus Aurelius would have been in some sense to see that truth is experiencing the illusion rather than we're in an illusion, you know, where, how would I say it? It's like we're inside truth. Soren Kierkegaard, Epicurus says, the greater the difficulty, the more glory in surmounting it. Soren Kierkegaard says the function of prayer is not to influence God, but rather to change the nature of the one who prays. Aristotle says happiness is the highest good. Democritus says the brave man is he who overcomes not only his enemies but his pleasures. Friedrich Nietzsche says without music, life would be a mistake. Margaret Mead says never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. I mean, yes, like, do you know what I'm saying? I don't know. It's as if, sure, yeah, a group of people can change the whole system. Social media is kind of doing that. But I think the biggest thing that changes the world is when what we can achieve in front of our eyes becomes more important than what's behind our eyes. Stephen Hawking says, 1. Remember to look up at the stars and not down at your feet. 2. Never give up work. Work gives you meaning and purpose, and life is empty without it. 3. If you're lucky enough to find love, remember it is there and don't throw it away. Guys, I think this is not Stephen Hawking. This is sage Stephen Hawking. Like such wisdom. Lao Tzu says, those who know do not speak, those who speak do not know. Marcus Aurelius says, when you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love. John Stuart Mill says, liberty consists in doing what one desires. Sure, but also how you do your desire, if it impinges on other people's freedom. It's as if freedom has to be organized. If you left a group of anarchists, like let's say inside a boardroom to figure out like a definition of meaning, it would in some sense be like a world's at war, you know? Plato says wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something, yeah. You know, sometimes, you know, when you're a fool, you can see the other side. Ludwig Wittgenstein says, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. I mean, depends on your, I would say, creative ability, right? If a person is playful, they're kind of like you know, playfulness is like it's the evolution of, you know, energy. Lao Tzu says simplicity, patience, compassion, these three are your greatest treasures. Simple in actions and thoughts, you return to the source of being. Patient with both friends and enemies, you accord with the way things are. Compassionate toward yourself, you reconcile all beings in the world. You know, some moments in life, guys, you know, you read a quote online and you wonder if you're on a sinking boat. John Locke says good and evil Reward and punishment are the only motives to a rational creature. I think the wonder of the future is another option. Fitzgerald F. Scott, I was within and without, simultaneously enchanted and repelled by the inexhaustible variety of life. Edmund Burke, all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. George Bernard Shaw, the reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the Yeah, it's another way of saying the reasonable person is trying to become, it's trying to secure the meaning of the past, but the unreasonable person is the only one who can see the future if the reason is based on the past. Because the sequencing of rationality is, you can say like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like how would I say it to you? It's sequences, it's steps, and it's how each step leads to the other, you know. You know, I actually believe until we get to the bottom, until we truly know what we are, our reason is, you know, as much as fictional, as fiction, like as anything subjective, you know what I'm saying? It's like either thoughts aren't real and we don't know what is being the body, or thoughts are real, do you know, and through thoughts we discover that there's something way more than even our mind. You know, think of it this way. If somebody says, how do you know you're being a biological body right now? The answer would be like, my mind is knowing it. Now, if somebody asked you, how do you know you're being a mind? That would require the unchangeable and additional dimension of the witness. That's the unchangeable awareness that all the yogis and pearl holders talk about. You know? Aristotle says, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act but a habit. William Blake says the truth that's told with bad intent beats all the lies you can invent. St. Augustine says we are too weak to discover the truth by reason alone. Marcus Zusak says maybe everyone can live beyond what they're capable of. Aristotle says happiness lies in virtuous activity, and perfect happiness lies in the best activity, which is contemplative. Socrates says, I cannot teach anybody anything, I can only make them think. Immanuel Kant says morality is not the doctrine of how we may make ourselves happy, but of how we may make ourselves worthy of happiness. That means morality requires purpose. If a person has no purpose, they can't be they have no morality. It's like the difference between speed and velocity. You know, it's like both have speed, velocity has direction. You know, it's like we need to increase the velocity of the psyche. Santosh Kalwar says we are addicted to our thoughts. We cannot change anything if we cannot change our thinking. W.K. Clifford says it is wrong always, everywhere, and for everyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. But the issue is, like, the evidence is changing. The one who is analyzing truth is changing, before the truth is confirmed. Right? That's the challenge of believing in anything in a changing world. Jan Martel says to choose doubt as a philosophy of life is akin to choosing immobility as a means of transportation. Rene Descartes would disagree, but I guess, doubt is really, another way to just become certain. To be honest, a person can have this attitude that you're just like an antenna in the moment, and thoughts are received, and based on which thoughts come first, the sequencing of the inner perception takes place. Now, thought can be language to some people. It can be like a film. It could be literally like behind your eyes, you're experiencing an event, and in front of your eyes, you can endlessly talk about it because you're seeing an actual event. You're seeing the film of the mind, and the only way you can see it is that if you realize you're not the mind. Actually, everything is being everything in a way that is inconceivable to a small part, to the microcosm and the macrocosm. Ludwig Wittgenstein, I don't know why we are here, but I'm pretty sure it is not in order to enjoy ourselves. Gilles Deleuze says a concept is a brick. It can be used to build a courthouse of reason, or it can be thrown through the window. Rene Descartes says one cannot conceive anything so strange and so implausible that it has not already been said by one philosopher or another. Confucius says life is really simple, but we insist on making it complicated. That's another way of Confucius just looking at his disciples and being like, chill, everybody chill. Seneca says, even while they teach, men learn. It's not that, like, learning is just the additional dimension. You just get to see more angles. Anything you concentrate on, you see more angles to. Like some people, like, okay, here, anybody can try this. Like, wherever you are, look at any object in front of you. Like, in front of me right now, there's like, a glass, okay? I'm looking at this glass, and it's as if I choose to have single-pointedness single-pointed concentration on this glass, it's as if my eyes are just seeing a glass, zoning out everything else in the background, just looking at the glass. And then what happens is that the brain will have the thoughts coming and going, and every thought that comes and goes can be associated to what is being looked at, but it needs single-pointedness of concentration at first. It's another way of saying, like, you need to pinpoint the center of the room, and then when you simply spin, you see it all, Iris Murdoch says love is extremely difficult realization that something other than oneself is real. That is one of the most incredible explanations on love I've heard. This is a bravo moment for mankind, this quote. Thomas Hobbes says leisure is the mother of philosophy. Because everybody needs space to think, George Lucas, no, try not, do or do not, there is no try. Oh, this is like Yoda. Yeah, Yoda says do or do not, there is no try. Yoda is like pretty much saying, okay, whatever you do, like, just go full out. I think what really living life means is to find something that you can love about it. and then that becomes an energy. It's another way of saying when a person trusts the world they're in, all the subconscious applications or programs occurring in their mind, they're released. Because freedom is in the room before we were in it. Freedom is the room. The simulation, it's like people are like, how do you get out of a simulation? The answer is you notice it's a simulation. That's it. That's how easy it is. Heraclitus says, time is a game played beautifully by children. John Locke says the mind is furnished with ideas by experience alone. Exactly. A direct experiential dimension surpasses ideological storytelling. Again, the skydiver analogy, the person who goes skydiving experiences something that, the person, Wikipedia skydiving type. Anyways, this list is like 125 quotes, guys. I'm halfway through. Dalai Lama says, this is my simple religion. No need for temples. No need for complicated philosophy. Your own mind, your own heart is the temple. Your philosophy is simple kindness. Because, guys, that's how a free being would react, right? This is why powerful beings suffer, because if they were free, they wouldn't need to demonstrate the power. Freedom is the teacher of power, right? That means those beings who seek power, their karma leads their psychology, and sort of like they will seek freedom at the end of their lives. A freedom from their own karma. That's the price of evil. Right? It may succeed momentarily, but it has to live with the memory it creates for its future self. Or it has to. Anyways, Jean-Paul Sartre, man is condemned to be free. It's such a badass thing to say. This is something where I think if Jean-Paul Sartre said this when he was younger, he'd graffiti it on a wall. I think, Jean-Paul Sartre's grandchildren 100% graffitied his quotes on walls, Something, just to have said it, it's like when we wonder about when questions fascinate us more than answers, you become a philosopher. When answers fascinate you more than questions, you become, in some sense, in a singular realm of narrative. You become whatever. You become religious, or you become materialist, and materialist only. Do you know what I mean? It's as if the mind is entranced by its absolutist grasp of like a perception. But in reality, it's like when you realize the unknown is there. And it's like this whole time, every being has been present, and then their mind has awakened to the moment, and then their body has been noticed to move. It's like what we are is the mystery of a lifetime being unraveled in every moment. Dan Millman says the journey is what brings us happiness, not the destination. Voltaire says all is for the best in the best of all possible worlds. That's a way of kind of logically explaining everything. Marcus Aurelius, like agreeing with heaven, a logical agreement with heaven. Marcus Aurelius says it is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live. Bertrand Russell, I would never die for my beliefs because I might be wrong. Aristotle says the aim of art is to represent not the outward appearance of things, but their inward significance. Exactly. Art is not just outer, do you know? Like there is an art to how the artwork looks like. There's an art to how the artist made the artwork. There's an art to how the artist looked at the canvas. And then there's an art to who the artist has been in their life. All of these are kind of like layers to the ultimate art. Martin Heidegger, He who thinks great thoughts often makes great errors. Right, but does that mean we should never think of great thoughts? Like, you know what I'm saying? Is Heidegger, denying greatness? Like, what is this? I think what he means is that if the thought is so great that it is unreal, an unreal narrative overlaid on a real narrative would lead to inefficiency. It's good to have dreams, but the strategy beyond when you awaken to them is your own choosing. Everybody chooses what kind of strategist of their own psyche they become. You choose what kind of pilot of your attention in a changing world you become. Every being is choosing ultimately, because what else can you do? Even Sartre is saying, we're condemned to freedom. Sir Francis Bacon, a little philosophy inclineth man's mind to atheism, but depth in philosophy bringeth men's minds about to religion. Yeah, it's pretty much like, you're first interested in the known, then you're interested in the unknown, then you see the unknown can't be known, then you look at the known and you realize maybe if the known is reset, the unknown can be known. That becomes the evolution of knowledge, but then you ultimately know that it's too big to be known by. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like the question mark is bigger than any ideological exclamation point. The question mark of what is really going on. Ayn Rand says devotion to the truth is the hallmark of morality. There is no greater, nobler, more heroic form of devotion than the act of a man who assumes the responsibility of thinking. I think what she means is that it's kind of like revolution, but the revolution behind the eyes before the revolution in front of the eyes is necessary. Pretty much the spirit of heroism is that it's pretty much a post-fear. Francis Bacon says things alter for the worse spontaneously, if they be not altered for the better designedly. I don't even know that's a word. Designedly. Oh my God! Imagine, designedly speaking. Designedly speech. I think that's a good way to explain these times. But anyways, John Stuart Mill, to do as one would be done by and to love one's neighbor as oneself constitute the ideal perfection of utilitarian morality. G.W.F. Hegel, whatever is reasonable, imagine it was W.T.F. Hegel. G.W.F. Hegel says whatever is reasonable is true, and whatever is true is reasonable. Bertrand Russell says this is patently absurd, but whoever wishes to become a philosopher must learn not to be frightened by absurdities. Marcus Aurelius, that's exactly, what I mean by, that's the heroic spirit of the mind, the heroic expression of the mind. Marcus Aurelius says our life is what our thoughts make it. Plato says you can discover more about a person in an hour of play than in a year of conversation. Will Durant says science is organized knowledge, wisdom is organized life. Socrates says there's only one good knowledge, knowledge, and one evil, ignorance. Yeah, pretty much it's like, are we, how open are our eyes in this world? Ludwig von Beethoven, don't only practice your art, but force your way into its secrets. For it and knowledge can raise men to the divine. Plato says that man is wisest who, like Socrates, realizes that his wisdom is worthless. Yeah, of course, there's so much more than us happening. Thich Nhat Hanh says the seed of suffering in you may be strong, but don't wait until you have no more suffering before allowing yourself to be happy. That means happiness is an instantaneous choice. It's as if it's a silent yes. Oh my God, I can't even pronounce this. Dides says history is philosophy teaching by examples. Hermann Hesse, it may be important to great thinkers to examine the world, to explain and despise it, but I think it is only important to love the world, not to despise it, not for us to hate each other, but to be able to regard the world and ourselves and all beings with love, admiration, and respect. And this can happen if you actually apply love, admiration, and respect not to the human being, to the whole world. That's how it happens in the most advanced way. Rene Descartes says if you would be a real seeker after truth, it is necessary that at least once in your life you doubt as far as possible all things. Alexander Dumas says, this guy's lucky he doesn't have another S at the end of his name. Alexander Dumas says, learning does not make one learned. There are those who have knowledge and those who have understanding. The first requires memory, and the second philosophy. The second requires direct experience. Really? Spinoza says, I can control my passions and emotions if I can understand their nature. This is very important, guys. A person, let's say a human being on this planet, may find itself in a state where I use the pilot analogy, where how the person is piloting themselves in the universe. If they're suffering and there's some sort of suffering, it means the inner realms and outer realms are off balance. That means there's turbulence in the airplane. There's a sort of frame of perception issue. But if they are in balance, smooth flights ahead. It's like the person the mind has a potential to just fathom itself in like a nanosecond is worthless, and then in another nanosecond is like filled with like endless worth, like infinite worth. The person's like, I'm not just worthy, I'm infinitely worthy. It's like Spinoza says, I read that. Epictetus says, don't just say you have read books. Show that through them you have learned to think better, to be a more discriminating and reflective person. Books are the training weights of the mind. They are very helpful, but it would be a bad mistake to suppose that one has made progress simply by having internalized their contents. Progress can't happen, guys, unless there is a great question. Like, unless you find something that is so important that it just automatically, imagine the question of questions being the greatest purpose that man can become an answer to. Anyways, Baruch Spinoza, if men were born free, they would, so long as they remained free from no If men were born free, they would, so long as they remained free, form no conception of good and evil. Yeah. Actually, no, because good and communication is an artificial reality, and the moment it's an artificial reality, it's possible to be dishonest, but in a natural state, you can't. Like the presence of human beings can even be said, like those who are honest, their energy is different. I think it's known, right? It's like nature knows what is here. Seneca, it is the power of the mind to be unconquered. I could totally see Seneca was saying that to like an emperor. Somebody's like, Seneca, it's like there's someone at the door, Imagine Seneca's wife, right? Seneca goes and opens the door, it's like an emperor, And Seneca's like, I don't have the time for, I don't have time to enlighten an emperor, He says it's the power of the mind to be unconquerable. And the king just thanks him and leaves him. Aristotle says, he who is unable to live in society, or who has no need because he is sufficient for himself, must be either a beast or a god. The god that became a beast, the beast that became a god. The dance of the endless known and unknown. Sun Tzu says even the finest sword plunged into salt water will eventually rust. Heraclitus says one cannot step twice in the same river. Victor Cousin says, if ignorance is bliss, there should be more happy people. GWF Hegel says, only one man ever understood me, and he didn't understand me. He's talking about himself. Swansea. Once upon a time, I dreamt I was a butterfly, fluttering hither and thither, to all intents and purposes a butterfly. I was conscious only of my happiness as a butterfly, unaware that I was myself. Soon I awoke, and there I was, veritably myself again. And now I do not know whether I was then a man dreaming I was a butterfly, or whether I am now a butterfly dreaming I'm a man. And I would say if Swansea wanted to put his foot on the gas pedal, what if you're neither? What if the mystery of intelligence is universal? What if we have been universal beings masquerading in how small we think our objective dimension is? You know, we are in the presence of the cosmos. There's an honor here, dear listeners, dear beings in the universal sector. Just the honor of existence is like the greatest advancement of experience. This is to me the poetry of not the modern world, but it's as if the best thing that people of the past could do was to get the present here, and the greatest thing that people in the present can do is in some sense gift the future with our furthest reach. That's it. We're all performers on the stage of the evolution of the human species. We choose how our attention moves, how the meaning of life becomes the moment. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz says, we live in the best of all possible worlds. Marcus Aurelius, if someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth, by which no one was ever truly harmed. It is the person who continues in his self-deception and ignorance who is harmed. John Locke. The mind is furnished with ideas by experience alone. I think this is repeating, guys. Lao Tzu says doing nothing is better than being busy doing nothing. Bertrand Russell. Okay, let me read the Lao Tzu. Doing nothing is better than being busy. Yeah, that means advance or fail. Bertrand Russell says it is undesirable to believe a proposition when there is no ground whatever for supposing it true. Okay, that's a really good statement. If you can't see the truth to a moment, so you're left with perceiving it as false. Richard P. Feynman. Physics isn't the most important thing. Love is. Socrates says the unexamined life is not worth living. Ayn Rand says, I never found beauty in longing for the impossible, and never found the possible to be beyond my reach. Guys, I don't think I've ever seen this many home runs of excellent quotes and like one quote double. René Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. Friedrich Nietzsche says, I assess the power of a will by how much resistance, pain, torture it endures, and knows how to turn to its advantage. I think it's just the demonstration of ability is like how we have journeyed through life to be, really. Because I mean, if the person constantly has a pessimistic perception and you're trying to envision the manifestation of chaos, then it's as if like what are you doing? it's like the world has to find a way to get every person's inner realm and outer realm to be able to be understood by them. That's it. Two worlds in one. It's like the body is yang, the mind is yin. And so in the body there's the mind, and in the mind there's the body. And they're both in one circle. Immanuel Kant says metaphysics is a dark ocean without shores or lighthouse, strewn with many a philosophic wreck. Henry David Thoreau says only that day dawns to which we are awake. There's more day to dawn. The sun is but a morning star. Seneca says virtue is nothing else than right reason. Aristotle says the energy of the mind is the essence of life. Protagoras, I didn't know somebody like that existed. Man is the measure of all things. Friedrich Nietzsche, madness is something rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, peoples, and ages it is the rule. I think this is another repeat. Anaxagoras, in everything there is a share of everything. Spinoza, the more you struggle to live, the less you live. Give up the notion that you must be sure of what you are doing. Instead, surrender to what is real within you, for that alone is sure. You are above everything distressing. John Locke says, no man's knowledge here can go beyond his experience. That's a very powerful statement. That's a very powerful statement. Leo Tolstoy sees the moments of happiness, love, and be loved. That is the only reality in the world. All else is folly. It is the one thing we are interested in here. Tolstoy is this next level Russian philosopher, says, seize the moments of happiness, love, and be loved. See, everybody, like all, greatness says love is the way. That is the only reality in the world, and all else is folly. It is the one thing we're interested in here. Yeah, but in order to build an event, it's like love. Love needs to be protected. And the only way it can be protected is that if the structure of the whole system is reset, readjusted. William of Ockham, entities should not be multiplied unnecessarily. This is Occam's razor, guys. That means it's like unnecessary. It's like multidimensionality is not necessary if a singular dimension can get the truth there. That's another approach. Simone de Beauvoir. And I don't know if people know this, but Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre, they were both like next level philosophers, and evidently they were a couple or something. So Simone de Beauvoir says one's life has value so long as one attributes value to the life of others by means of love, friendship, and compassion. Ludwig Wittgenstein says philosophy is a battle against the bewitchment of our intelligence by means of language. Nicholas Tharcher says the essence of independence has been to think and act according to standards from within, not without. To follow one's own path, not that of the crowd. That means your inner to reach a state where you are trusting your inner life. That's how you can experience, I would say, freedom beyond the mind. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, man is born free, but is everywhere in chains. Jean-Paul Sartre, it is therefore senseless to think of complaining, since nothing foreign has decided what we feel, what we live, or what we are. Bertrand Russell says science is what you know, philosophy is what you don't know. Siddhartha Gautama says words do not express thoughts very well. Everything immediately becomes a little different, a little distorted, a little foolish, and yet it also pleases me and seems right that what is of value and wisdom of one man seems nonsense to another. I mean, Siddhartha Gautama is the name of the Buddha, guys. The Buddha is a title that means awakened. I would say the Buddha was just like, oh my God, everybody's putting their own value in the moment. Our suffering is self-created. So when we discover the nature of the emptiness of space, it's as if we it's like we free our mind from how our body has attached to a subject. And we witness the nature of how the mind happens without us interfering, and how the body happens without us interfering. And in the middle of this sort of synchronized smooth flight of the dimensions behind your eyes and in front of your eyes, you get to see that all of it is held in the moment. It's like the person's like, I have a body, I have a mind, wait a minute, I also am noticing them at the same time. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that noticer, that knower is actually an unknower. It is the unknown looking through. In some sense, we've been looking for divinity, but we're the soul in the moment. We are, the life of a rock in the middle of a void. We are the life of the lifetimes of not just, our names, but of Earth. We are the children of the planet, and the planet knows who's here. That's the beautiful thing about nature. When you love it, it is a universe. It's an ally. If you hate it, it becomes unnecessary. I don't know how to say it, but it's like deep down, based on how any person behaves, they know there's an emotion of what they feel is open to happening to them. All I can say is that unless everybody becomes honest, we can't get to see the most incredible civilization. And honesty means you honor your eyes, and you also honor the eyes of the world. As simple as that. Hegel says what is rational is actual, and what is actual is rational. Oh my God, Hegel's true. And that's the last quote, guys. 125 quotes. This was a long quote tunnel. Thanks for listening. Honestly, I just wanted to, get these quotes out there. One day I may be an old man, listening to all these quotes and be like, it was worth recording it. Who knows, It's like for those who discover the unknown nature of a sort of eternal life of the viewer that's looking out through the eyes, it's as if death is not a concept anymore. It's just like, how is eternity going to move? How is infinity going to dissolve into the absolute? In some sense, that is, I think, it's the beautiful. It's like a beautiful exit of beyond. Just like an airplane lifts off from the airport, and you can see the airport from the windows of the airplane. You can see the whole, the whole town. It's as if this to surpass chaos and order is similar, where we are flying beyond the dimensions of what is defining chaos and order. And so, may violence be pushed into cyberspace, and may the philosophers of the future, instead of swords, sharpen their minds and imagine imagine an advanced civilization based on skill and novelty. Do you know? As if we build a civilization that is just trying to encourage every part of it to wonder. In some sense, it's as if we will, to be honest, as we are a species that can actually never stop exploring. We are, like in that anime show, Dragon Ball Z, it's like there was a planet with a warrior species. We are like an explorer species. And it's just like how we ride the waves of a changing world. Eventually, you start with analysis, geometry, you seek to logically comprehend, but then you begin to see the moment is alive, and then you see the value of love. But until the work is done, the inner permissions aren't there. So it's as if it's like the Titan is chained until it is released, and it was the imagination of gods in motion. Freedom is beautiful. And if we are wondering about ultimate freedom, it's as if we're wondering about the ultimate beauty. And the ultimate beauty, hilariously, all conscious points of attention in this realm, by just being here, you're being on. A universal being, every living life force, movement of life force in the universe is its like family member. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like it's comrades in the battlefield, of time. We're all journeying in the space-time continuum, trying to figure out what's the best case scenario. And the species is so emotional and convinced by the past that it's not even wondering about what are the best case scenarios. It's like the educational system is like a circus, right? The teacher gives the student an assignment, right? The student goes and writes a response, and then the teacher gives a grade to the student, and then the teacher throws the exam away. It's like we cut trees just so the teacher could be like, all right, kiddo, you get an A+, and then we throw the paper in like the trash bin. Really, it's just discovery. Somehow, if there's an archaic revival of the spirit of discovery, it's like the legend of the castles in the sky are not far away. Their archaic revival is imminent. From dark streets, we shall become a species that will walk among the stars. And philosophers that sharpen their minds with the sky's edge. Pretty much in the future, the way I see it is that there's just going to be advanced communicators. And there's going to be many dimensions to how communication can happen. The species uses its creativity to, in some sense, multidimensionalize the context of civilization, therefore giving freedom of dimensions. And at the same time, when you give freedom, you increase patience. When you increase patience, the species makes wiser choices. That means imagine all the people in power, all the people who are keeping the civilization the way it is now. They woke up tomorrow and they're like, oh my God, what if instead of making people suffer, right, seeing people as an issue, right, we saw it in some sense that people, if it's as if you give the greatest freedom to humanity to see what the greatest humanity can do. I'm telling you, it's as if it's like, regardless of let's say an entity with a demonic intent or an entity with an angelic intent, it's as if I am saying like the demonic intent becomes an angelic intent until the advanced civilization is made, and then the same pattern can continue, which seems chaos order seems to be an infinite kind of pattern. The idea is we build an advanced civilization, And we wonder about the most advanced state of intelligence. And philosophers are a way of doing this. And what philosophy is, I would say there isn't a philosopher, there is a philosophical urge in all beings. Do you know? And I would recommend people to start writing, but have this attitude where you only pick up the pen when something is so important that you can't let it go. That's when I start the recordings. When an idea comes that I feel it's so important that if I don't talk about it, it will disappear and it will return to the void. As the future generations smile, the whole universal sector cheers, rise, mankind, rise. Imagine there was like a coliseum, giant coliseum, you know, of all the extraterrestrial, impossible, fathomable beings, and they were all watching human species. And imagine they're all staring at the human species and just being like, rise, go beyond your limits, for why else are your limits there? Why else have they become your limits? Beyond the stories of the mind, beyond the synchronization of the outer and the inner life. An advanced communicator is the most advanced communication of the universal sector. It's another way of saying the most advanced human beings in 2022 are those human beings who realize they're being the universe before they're being a human being. And so the freedom of that experiential context, and it's an experience, the freedom that brings, it's as if your inner realms are released. The chains of your inner realms are all become released. Believe it or not, it's freedom can be instantaneous. That's like a secret. The yogis kept that secret alive. Ancient mysticism kept that secret alive. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. And you know, after reading this quote tunnel, I realized, you know, when I was reading these quotes, I was like, at the same time as I was reading them, I was comparing my own nature to the universe of each quote. And I realized that the inner realms and outer realms, it's kind of like I think I need a desire adjustment on the importance of you know, a collective purpose in life. You know, human beings live a lifespan of 100 years. If the species is smart, it will live till infinity. And we are the mind and the intelligent decisions of the future. It's as if we don't realize it yet, but if a person doesn't do anything in 2022 and does something in 2022, still the future will be influenced. If you do nothing, the future will in some sense frown. If you do something now, if we care for updating this whole thing that we're all living in, if the pilots of consciousness arrive, I feel like in the next 100 years, some of the most fascinating and incredible geniuses of Earth will be born. Do you know? Honestly, guys, I'm not joking. In the next 100 years, I think some of the most incredible human beings are going to be born. And any child born in the year 2022, it's as if it's a golden year. 2022 is the best year for inventions, best year for new ideas. I'm telling you. Anybody who wants to write a book, finish it this year. I honestly write so much that oh man, the world has